meeting of the Community Development Committee for the Metropolitan Council for August 20th, 2018. First order of business is to approve our agenda. Members, is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The agenda is adopted. Next is the approval of our August 6th minutes. Is there a motion?
Move approval. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there comments or changes? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. Our minutes are also adopted. Just a brief chair's announcement. I want to make a great thanks to the interns. Unfortunately, I was not able to participate in the showcase as I had hoped this afternoon, but I'm really pleased that there was an opportunity for sharing of the great work that has gone on, and I know a number of the interns are going to be able to continue on with us and continue the great work that they've been involved in. So thanks to all who were involved in making that possible. Our first item of business, members, is item 2018-217. It's a public hearing for the Public Housing Agency Plan, the 2019 annual PHA plan. And just a couple of notes of welcome and thank you for anyone attending for the hearing. If I might just ask if there are members of the audience who would like to speak before the hearing this afternoon. Are there any members of the audience who would like to speak this afternoon? One last time, are there any members of the audience who would like to speak this afternoon? Okay, I see no interested parties who would like to speak, so I would like to just note that the public comment on the 2019 annual PHA plan comments will be accepted through 4:30 p.m. August 30th through a variety of means that are available online and in person here. You can write to us, you can email us, and you can also record a comment on the public comment line at 651-602-1500. So, having no public testimony offered, the hearing is adjourned. Our next item, members, is item 2018-215, City of Medina 2040 Comprehensive Plan Review number 218311. And I know that Director Brajas would like to make some overview comments before we begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, council members. This is our first comprehensive plan that you'll be reviewing, 2040 plan that is for a city that includes a comprehensive sewer plan as well. So you'll see your report is a little bit different. It's a joint report with the Environment Committee and the Community Development Committee. You'll also see this with the landfall plan as well, being that they're also connected to the Metropolitan disposal system. So comprehensive plans that are connected to our system have their comprehensive sewer plan reviewed and approved by the council, whereas the overall comprehensive plan itself from a community is something that the council authorizes the city to place into effect. So we have slightly different authorities. So as a committee, you're reviewing the comprehensive plan. The Environment Committee has reviewed the comprehensive sewer plan for Medina at their meeting last week, Tuesday, and they'll be reviewing Landfall's comprehensive sewer plan at their meeting next week, Tuesday. So just making that distinction for you, you'll see a breakdown in the recommendations in your staff report as well as in the advisory comments on page 3 as well. So if you have any questions about that structure, I'm happy to answer those, but otherwise I turn it over to Freya to present this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Freya Thaman. I'm the sector representative for District 1, and I'll be presenting Medina's comprehensive plan today, their 2040 plan today. As Lisa mentioned, Medina will be the first regionally sewered community to have its 2040 comprehensive plan acted on by the council. It was one of the very first preliminary plans that we received for review a little more than a year ago. Throughout the planning process, there's been ongoing coordination with the city, particularly in the areas of wastewater and housing review. And coordination has included a meeting in May that included city council members and staff, as well as Metropolitan council members and staff. And thank you, Mr. Chair, for your participation in that meeting. And Dusty Finke, the planning director for the city, is here, and thanks to the city and the city's council members. We've appreciated the city's time and coordination and additional supplemental information provided to ensure that the city's plan is consistent with council policies. As Lisa mentioned, the city's plan was the first 2040 plan to be reviewed by the Environment Committee. It was reviewed on August 14th, and then the city's plan is scheduled for Metropolitan Council action on Wednesday. Just to provide a little general background first. Medina is located in west central Hennepin County and surrounded by the communities of Corcoran, Maple Grove, Plymouth, Orono, Maple Plain, Independence, and Greenfield. The city of Loretto, you can see on the western side, is a small community about 165 acres, and it's completely within the border of Medina. As shown here, Thrive designates Medina in two different planning designations. The area in the upper northeast third that's shown in yellow and generally along Highway 55 is in the emerging suburban edge designation. And then the rest of the community is in green and in the diversified rural designation. This map shows the regional systems in Medina. Trunk Highway 55 runs through the northeast part of the city, and a small segment of Trunk Highway 12 is in the southwest portion of Medina. Medina has several regional park facilities, including the more than 2,000 acre Morris T. Baker Park Reserve in southwest Medina. And within Baker Park is the Lake Independence Regional Trail, which generally runs north-south through the park and on the east side of Lake Independence. There are several regional trail search corridors, and these corridors are shown in the larger purple and tan lines. These search corridors are the Lake Sarah Regional Trail Search Corridor, which runs east-west through the city, and then the North-South 1 Regional Trail Search Corridor on the east side of Medina. In addition, the Woolsfeld Woods Scientific and Natural Area is located in the south-central part of Medina. This area is owned and managed by the DNR, but offered protection through the Regional Parks Policy Plan. The Metropolitan Council provides wastewater services to the city. The majority of the city's regional service is provided by the Metropolitan Wastewater Treatment Plant in St. Paul, and then there's a smaller portion of the city that's served by the Blue Lake Wastewater Treatment Plant in Shakopee.
For one moment, we have a question from Councilmember
I
Elkins.
was looking on here. I didn't see any sewer interceptors. They're not shown on these maps.
Yeah, let me see. Councilmember Elkins.
The blue line in the
Yeah.
up towards the right with the M on it.
Yeah,
Freya, right underneath Plymouth, where the word Plymouth is, you can see the sewer interceptor coming from the east and then going south toward Highway 55.
M, I think, is the metering station.
Mhm.
Does that answer your question, Councilmember Wilkins?
Yes, thank you.
The city's forecasts are shown here. Based on most recent data between now and 2040, the city is forecasted to gain about 1,200 households, and less than 100 of those are forecasted to be unsewered or unseptic. The city is forecast to gain about 800 jobs. During the review process, the city and council staff agreed to adjust allocations of sewered and unsewered forecasts based on better information from the city on existing unsewered households on septic systems. So you'll see in the staff report that recommendation 2 includes adopting these updated forecasts as detailed here and in table 1 of the review record. This figure shows the city's existing land uses. There's a significant number of natural resources in Medina, including about 5,000 acres of wetland and open water. You can see how prominent the wetlands are here. The areas that are white with the blue background are the wetlands within the city. The city's plan, its vision and goals include protecting and enhancing significant natural resources and open spaces within Medina. And that protection of natural resources is core to the plan and integrated into the different chapters of the plan. This is the city's future land use map. Most of the city's future sewer, residential, commercial, and business development is planned in the northeast area of the city along Highway 55. In addition, there's a smaller area of high-density residential planned in the southwest area of the city along Highway 12. The city's plan is consistent with Thrive and land use policies for emerging suburban edge communities and areas. And as shown in the review record, the planned net residential density for new sewered residential development exceeds 3 units an acre. A large portion of the city is rural and will not be provided regional sewer services during the time frame covered by this plan. The rural areas include agricultural land uses guided at 1 per 40 acres, including egg reserves, as well as rural residential areas and future development land use areas, and those are shown in light green and then light gray around the city of Loretto. These areas will maintain a maximum density of 1 unit per 10 acres for new development. And the plan indicates that within the future development area, this is the post-2040 Seward area, the land will be protected, requiring ghost plats for subdivision so that future post-2040 urban expansion is not compromised. The plan indicates the city may consider exceptions to the 1 per 10 max density standard for rural residential development that protects natural areas and puts land into permanent conservation. The plan states that these exceptions would be allowed only if consistent with the council's flexible development guidelines. The plan included a proposed change to the long-term sewer service area, and that change was discussed at the Environment Committee on August 14th. The plan proposed removing approximately 760 acres of Blue Lake's long-term sewer service area, and the plan indicated that this area wouldn't provide effective, efficient extension of post-2040 sewer service because of the amount of wetlands in that area, topography of the area, and historic development patterns within that area. There are wastewater infrastructure improvements that are happening in and around Loretto, which added about 760 acres to the Blue Lake long-term sewer service area. So this proposed removal balances what was added. The Environment Committee supported staff recommendation that the change would conform with the 2040 Water Resources Policy Plan. As discussed in the staff report, there have been ongoing discussions with the city regarding housing policy. We've appreciated the city's coordination on this and the information that was provided in June, which made the city's plan consistent with housing policy. This slide, which is figure 8 in the staff report, is a new dashboard that housing staff has developed and created to show the consistency with housing policy, and you'll see this in future comp plan staff reports and then in future amendments as well. As shown here, the plan was found consistent with housing policy. The plan acknowledges the city's share of the region's need for affordable housing in the 2021 through 2030 decade, which is 244 units. And these 244 units are based on forecasted growth 2021 through 2030. The plan guides sufficient land at higher densities of 8 or more units an acre to support the city's allocation of affordable housing need for that 2021 through 2030 decade. Staff review of the plan found that the city's 2040 comprehensive plan conforms with regional system plans is consistent with council policies and is compatible with the plan of adjacent local governmental units in affected jurisdictions. So the proposed action before you today is to adopt the attached review record and advisory comments and authorize the city to place its 2040 comprehensive plan into effect, adopt the revised forecast as detailed in Table 1 of the review record, advise the city to implement the post-council action advisory comments on page 3, and then advise the city of the advisory comments detailed on page 1 and in the review record under surface water, land use, housing, water supply, and forecasts. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions. And as I mentioned, Dusty Finke, the city's planning director, is also here as well.
Thank you very much. Council members, are there questions? Councilmember Munt.
Mr. Chair, since the city's planning director is here, I would love some input on how the comprehensive planning process went. We tried to provide tools that would make it easier for you. I'm wondering if that was your experience.
Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Mott, staff, thank you very much for your time. I would say that from my perspective in coordinating with the local planning staff, actually I sat on, I believe, the focus group, our work group, when they were creating the online version of the local planning handbook. So I got to play around with the website as they were working through it. And I think it was a really useful tool that staff was able to utilize going through the process, find all that information in a much more convenient way for us. So by and large, I think that the process went very well with the interaction with Met Council. As Freya noted throughout, we were able to have an open dialogue with staff and actually meet with a few of the council members on talking through the issues. So yes, very much I think the process went well. Of course, we also had our process in the city with our public participation and going through that process as well. And I think it did go smooth.
Councilmember Dorfman.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Can you talk a little bit about affordable housing in Medina and, how much there exists today and what the city is thinking about how you're going to achieve the additional forecasted number over the years ahead?
Mr. Chair, Council Member, we did have a recent project which was supported through the state, which was implemented within the city, some actual restricted affordable housing project, which was developed, I believe, 3 years ago, and has been a success. We're filled up on that site with a waiting list, not surprisingly, because as you'll probably look through our plan, we do not have a lot of options at those rents or purchase prices. So it is a struggle in the city of Medina with land prices the way they are. You almost meet the threshold in terms of the rents and the cost on just the ground, let alone trying to get a structure built on it is the reality. So there needs to be those support through the state programs and so forth. We have some disadvantage because we don't have availability to transit very conveniently in the primary portion of the city where we have our sewer and water infrastructure, which is why we've emphasized the southwest corner of the city, adjacent to the city of Maple Plain, where there is Met Council express service and a park and ride in the city of Maple Plain. So we did redesignate that property from a commercial designation to high density, trying to realize that asset which is available to us from the Metropolitan Council. And ultimately was the primary discussion point that we had throughout the review was the staging of that development. The city would love to have that property available for development as soon as our plans put into effect, maybe next week if everything continues to go well this week. However, because of the gap, as the city sees it, between the time frame of the council allowing cities to place their plan into effect. So we can place our plan into effect anytime here in the near future, but the allocation is not considered until 2021. That has been a struggle because we're not allowed to um, recognize those units within our allocation. In terms of scale, those units account for a significant amount of the growth in Medina over the next 20 years. In fact, it's about half of the forecasted growth within the city over the next 10 years is actually at higher densities above 8 units an acre, and that is a change to our historical development pattern. So as we looked at that reality, um, some of the alternatives we talked through staff, and it was a great meeting, and we talked through a lot of alternatives to try to allow us to develop, allow that property to develop in the southwest corner of the city prior to 2021. But they all had to do with finding additional property at higher densities. But the reality, they would have to have those same shortfalls. We would have to delay development in some other corner of the city until 2021. So we had that disadvantage as we considered any of those alternatives. So it's unfortunate because we do have a couple of the property owners represented here this evening, and the fear is that by delaying to 2021, if economic circumstances change in the meantime, we might not be able to realize that higher density housing, which provide that flexibility for some housing at lower price points. So that's why we did provide the letter, and we do request that the committee consider, if you can't see a way where you could see that it's not inconsistent with your housing action plan, just recognizing the fact that our plan is a little bit earlier than the other cities, so there's a little bit bigger of a gap between when we can place our plan into effect and that 2021 time frame for the allocation.
I'm not.
Councilmember Elkins.
I'm not tracking on that issue. What is the difference between when they put their plan into effect and when their allocation?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Elkins, the current plan that's in place, all communities have their 2030 plans. 2030 plans address affordable housing need in the current decade, so from 2011 to 2020.
Yep.
For the 2040 plans, we ask communities to address the next decade, so from 2021 to 2030. And that is the difference in staging that we're talking about. In order to be consistent with the 2040 plan expectations, then sufficient land has to be guided in that decade to meet the next decade's share of the affordable housing need allocation. If you're going to develop that earlier, you're meeting demand today, which is fantastic. We definitely have a demand today, as this committee is well familiar with. But then you need to add some additional land in the next decade in order to accommodate that decade's need for 2021 to 2030.
So follow up then. So has the community already met its need for the current decade?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Elkins, as far as production, actually producing, no, but it was a very large number. I don't recall what the total number was, but I also don't recall what the total production was off the top of my head either.
Councilmember Elkins, I think for the 2030 plan, the affordable housing need allocation for the city was 506 units. And as Desi mentioned, they had a Dominion project that produced 26 units. So that's where they stand within their affordable housing need. 26 units of affordable housing have been developed.
So I'm still
Councilmember
confused.
Elkins.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Not at all.
So why wouldn't you just add the
Right.
current decade and the next decade?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Elkins, the current decade and the next decade are not additive. This decade's demand is a decade that's supposed to be met today. The next decade is based on the growth that we expect to occur in that decade. So we don't add them one on top of the other. And even if we did, the number would be even higher than the 244 units that Medina is expected to produce for this next decade or expected to plan for than what they haven't met. The other reason I'd like to also point out is that growth expectations for the 2030 plan were sometimes much higher,
Yep.
especially for plans that came in earlier in the process than what was actually realized on the ground. So we don't want to get into the cycle of overinflating a demand. There is still a demand. It's more than 26 for the current decade, but it might overinflate that demand otherwise if we continue to carry that forward.
So I'm still confused. Is why wouldn't the 2040 number just supersede the 2030 number when the 24 plan is put into effect?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Elkins, it is the affordable housing need for that number. That is true. And in order to be consistent, that land has to be available in that next decade in order to meet the next decade's worth of growth. If they develop that today, then it's not available. So if that land becomes developed, then in order to meet the next decade's worth of growth, they need to make land available to support that. So that would be akin to someone saying, let's kind of simplify it a bit, that we have a growth of 100 units in this decade and 100 units in the next decade. We haven't met our growth in this decade. We're going to use up all of our land now, which means we won't have any land to support the next decades, and we're not guiding more to do that either. So we want to make sure that we're both meeting today's demand for affordable housing, as well as providing sufficient land for the next decade's worth of affordable housing as well. Developing that land today is an option, and like Mr. Finke discussed, we did talk a lot about a lot of different options that the city could pursue within their plan, whether it was finding additional land, guiding at different densities, or some combination thereof, that would both allow that development to occur today and provide sufficient land in the next decade for growth.
Additional questions? Yes, Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there land currently available today at higher densities, or is there nothing under the 2030 plan available for those sorts of projects?
It's been a little while since I've, Councilmember Wolf, it's been a little while since I've seen the city's 2030 plan. I do know that they had areas like their Uptown Hamel area that was guided at higher densities with the last plan, and now are at lower minimum densities. But I think Dusty might be able to speak to the actual 2030 plan.
Mr. Chair, Council Member, I think the Uptown Hamel area would be the predominant area currently in our comprehensive plan of developable as it stands, that could be developed with affordable housing. The reality is, and I think this was frankly my struggle is through the process, is that the property being talked about that we're hoping to be able to develop here soon is added as available for high density housing. We've converted it from commercial to high density housing to serve that goal. From what I can tell of property that we have developable today, there, with the exception of the Uptown Hamel area, which is a small redevelopment district in the city, we don't have any acreage that is developable at those higher densities. So it's not like we are swapping out of one district or one decade from the other one. The Met Council's housing allocations and how that corresponded to land use, as you know, is a little bit different on our last comprehensive plan go-around. So it's not an exact, the densities change, the exact percentages change, so even that isn't exactly linear. But if you just look at property in the city guided for density over 8 units an acre, today we don't have any acreage. We're looking to add it a little bit sooner to encourage that development, not swap out other land. I will grant that we did lower the density in the Uptown Hamel area, which actually was previously 7, so wouldn't have qualified anyway. We lowered it a little bit as I tried to encourage some development in that area. It's small lots and it hasn't seen a lot of development, so we're trying to add some flexibility. But as far as that goes, I don't believe that we'd have land that's that we're taking out in the current decade. We're just looking for that flexibility to be able to do it sooner, because those units will be, of course, available if they're developed in the next year by 2030 as well.
Councilmember Wolf.
Is the city looking to be a participant in livable communities?
Councilmember Wolf, the city is a participant in livable communities.
Mis-
Councilmember Wolf?
So it sounds like if you do the housing earlier, then you don't meet the rules later to be in livable communities. So you could actually do these developments under livable communities now and then get out after. If you, I mean, is that one of the things that was discussed? I mean, it seems dumb that we would want them to not build the affordable housing now when they have the developers and want to do it as just this sort of technical thing. And I mean, if it means that you do livable communities, get a couple developments done, and drop out, that's not my first choice. I kind of liked what Councilmember Elkins said about having the period run from when your comp plan is approved until the next one for your 10 years rather than being stuck on a calendar. That seems to make more sense to me, but I don't know if that's if that would be like this huge public hearing policy change thing in order to be able to do that. And if that is the case, then maybe doing the developments and just then dropping out of livable communities after that would be the answer, because if you don't have any other high density land or any major redevelopment projects, it may not matter.
Councilmember Elkins?
You could guide more land for affordable housing.
That's what I was going to say. Councilmember Barber?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have the Regional Growth Strategies Work Group, and perhaps this is something that, because I'm fully expecting that because of the rate of development right now, this is probably not the last time we're going to have this discussion. And so I think it might be something to take to that group because it does represent a cross-functional group among council from the different committees. So it could be a good opportunity to vet it out further to see if there's policy changes or to see if, there are ways that we can be adaptable for these communities. Thought?
I appreciate that suggestion. I think one of the challenges in this particular case is this is, as Mr. Finke said, really at the beginning of the cycle of submittals, and I have concerns about setting precedent where we're changing policy pretty significantly in terms of how we're accounting for affordable housing production and managing the framing of those goals. There's been a lot of recent reporting about the scale of demand in this region for affordable housing, and obviously zoning and land use controls are things that we construct at the local level, and then we also are involved in that discussion at the regional level. I'd really love to see each community able to respond to that large regional demand. And this feels like an opportunity to do our part to nudge a little bit in that space. I want to really thank you for the letter that you submitted to us in early June. That is included in your packet, members, at the very end of the package, and I think lays out that perspective. I also want to say thank you for the opportunity to join the conversation with you and the city administrator and two council members from the city. I thought that was a very positive and candid conversation among us. And I guess from my perspective, I would really like to see us move forward with the staff recommendation here, but also want to have a conversation among council members if that's of interest.
Nope.
Sign my name on a sheet to speak.
Okay. That is not in our typical protocol, but I would be willing to invite you to speak on this matter, certainly. If you would, please identify yourself for the record.
Here. I thought that's what committee meetings were for. I'm sorry. My name is Dennis Zilla, 3125 Holly Lane, North Plymouth. Dusty did a good job of explaining what we see as the issue relative to the 13 acres in the southwest quadrant. I don't know if you could put that little future land use map up. I'll try not to be too lengthy here, but I think all of a sudden someone mentioned technical issue. I think that's kind of what this is barely ending up being, and I think there's a fear on your committee or maybe on the full council of setting a precedent here. But I think what's happening is we're losing perspective. We should be focusing on units, affordable housing units, and the need as opposed to time frames. And that's what we've got going here. We've got a time frame issue, a gap, I guess, as Dusty explained. I want to mention first, before I forget, I'm representing Scott Baker, who's the majority landowner of two of the landowners. Larry Palm is the other landowner for the property in the southwest quadrant. We want to see the Medina 2040 plan approved on next Wednesday. We're not here to raise any issues with that because we know how hard Medina's council has worked with committees and public and God knows how many other people for over 2 years to get their plan approved. And we've been working with them. We actually were led to believe that beginning 2018, we would be able to see the property re-guided and rezoned. And then all of a sudden, this technical issue part of that kind of came up more so in the last 6-8 months developed. We're really looking for flexibility on the staging. Our land is currently commercial. The southwest quadrant, as one of the earlier exhibits showed, to handle 161 units. We currently have a purchase agreement from a developer for the southwest quadrant, the 13 acres mentioned. He's interested in developing 200 units, not 161. No tax increment financing. This entity has done 300 units in Maple Grove, 200 plus units in Plymouth, all affordable. I can't guarantee that he's going to meet the criteria for affordable on this property, but that's his mode of operation. We have water and sewer available. We have county road access, and we know from working with the city that the city would like to see high-density housing in this area and no other area within the community. When I talk about flexibility, I'm talking about a schedule, and I'll kind of give you some idea where maybe the gap isn't as great as we think it is, because I've talked to the developer's representative. He said if we could get this thing moving, they would apply in September. They would like to have their approvals with the city by April 30th of 2019, and they would be in design and construction from May 2019 to March of 2020. So that's not 2021, which is what the city's being asked to do. Occupancy, April 2020. That's really 9 months earlier than 2021. But I don't know when the clock starts. Does it start at developers' ability to apply, or does it start at the occupancy date? I'm not sure, but either way, it becomes a timing issue because the developer would like to be able to occupy rent by the spring of 2020. Okay? And the need is now in Medina. We think the request is consistent with the priorities of the council's housing plan. I don't need to read those to you. You obviously know what they are. So really, what we're asking for is some flexibility here, really. I mean, I know you're worried about precedent, but this project may go away. And then we lose the opportunity, Medina loses the opportunity for achieving their high density housing. Obviously, it's a little earlier than what you'd like to see it achieved, but it solves the problem. You know, let's get away from the time frame issue and start dealing with the reality of the need and try to figure out how to make that need work for the benefit of everybody.
Thank you very much. If I might ask a follow-up question, I'm sensitive about the argument you make here that there's a market opportunity and a willing seller, a developer, et cetera. Has there been conversation with the city? Maybe this is a question for you, Mr. Finke, about moving forward with a comprehensive plan amendment, this calendar year, moving forward to capitalize on this opportunity to develop affordable housing now, really quite apart from this dialogue about which decade we're accounting for affordable housing.
But the issue comes back to the city approves it, it goes back to Met Council. Met Council says, okay, you can count it in your 2010, 20 plan, 20, whatever the heck it is. But we're not going to let you count it for 2021. And so we're back to this circle. We go nowhere by going through a comprehensive plan amendment that I see, other than we're wasting time and money.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for your testimony.
Mr. Chair, members, if I may, I think the difficulty for us, it's a matter of scale. I mean, this is for Medina is a very large project, maybe not much for what you're used to seeing, but for us, it's a very significant project. Again, in terms of scale, if it's 200 units, that is 20% of the growth we're going to see over the next 20 years. It's 40% of the growth we're going to see over the next 10 years by your forecast that you've provided to us. Now, if we find that, let this project come ahead and then find another one of similar scale, you can see, I mean, how significant that is for a city with the growth forecast in our way. I mean, I understand the desire, and we did not pause at identifying the acreage to meet the allocation within this time frame. I think it's important to recognize how much our forecasts were reduced, which we're in favor of because of the infrastructure availability and other things. I think that's because we don't have transit. We certainly supported the reduction of forecasts that the Met Council has afforded us through this planning process. But now 200 units becomes a very large share of that reduced forecast, and that's where just finding another one of a similar size is really difficult for the city.
Council members, do you have questions? I would otherwise entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Discussion to the motion. Councilmember Wolf.
I just wanted to clarify before I vote. Now, if we approve this, everything they can put it into effect, and then their city council can decide, do they want to go ahead with this project early and potentially drop out of livable communities, or delay it to keep their eligibility for livable communities. That part of it won't be decided by what we do today, right?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Wolf, I refer to the proposed action on your first page, number 4, letter D, and that goes exactly to that. It's advising the city that if there is a reduction in that higher density residential land made in the next decade, then the city would need to amend its plan and need to ensure consistency with the housing policy plan in order to remain eligible. So if they
but if they don't,
if
then
they
they're just not eligible for livable communities
in the next
decade.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And not consistent with housing policy and
Right,
the Land
right.
Planning Act to guide sufficient land.
Okay, discussion of the motion. Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Members, the next item is item 2018-220, City of Landfall Village 2040 Comprehensive Plan Review. number 21800-1, Corinne Wendell. Welcome.
Hello. Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and council members. My name is Corinne Wendell, Sector Rep for Districts 11 and 12, and I'll be presenting the item for Landfall's 2040 Comprehensive Plan. And so Landfall, as you can see on the map, is located in the west central of Washington County, surrounded on all sides by the city of Oakdale, with a border of Maplewood to the west, Woodbury to the south, and Lake Elmo to the east. It's about 0.1 square miles or 53 acres. As shown here on the map, it is a suburban community designation, which Thrive authorizes it to have a residential density of at least 5 units per acre for development and redevelopment. In terms of regional systems, for transportation, as you can see to the south of the city limit line, in that red dashed line, you'll see along Highway 94 is planned Gold Line bus BRT, and so that's marked by that line. Also with wastewater running from south to north within the city limits is the MCES Interceptor, and that's that light blue line that runs through the city limits. When we're looking at council forecasts, we do have a minor revision that's being requested, and so the city's forecast is shown here with previous council forecasts and revised. And so based on most recent data, between now and 2040, the city is not expected to grow very much. So the city does propose a slightly higher forecast for population and household to reflect recent growth. And the city had previously discussed the forecast revision with council staff, and therefore council staff finds the revised forecast reasonable based on the latest population and household estimates. And so the city does use the revised forecast consistently throughout the plan. And then in terms of existing land use, so within the city of Landfall, they do guide their existing manufactured housing lots as manufactured housing park. And then they do have a few other land use designations, such as multifamily, retail, and other commercial, industrial, and park. And so with the future land use map, there aren't very many changes. We'll see the land use classifications of residential, commercial, industrial, park and recreation, and open water within the city. And so with that, we ask that the landfall, or we find that the landfall's comprehensive plan conforms to regional system plans, is consistent with council policies, compatible with plans of adjacent communities and affected jurisdictions. And also within page 1 of the review record, list here for the proposed action to authorize the city of Landfall to place its 2040 comprehensive plan into effect, to revise the city's forecast as shown in table 1 of the review record, advise the city to implement the advisory comments in the review record for transportation and housing, and also wanted to let you know that there's a representative here from the city, should you have any questions. And then also Kyle Colvin is here from Environmental Services, questions of him. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for the report. Other questions, committee members? Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just point out that this is an example of one of the cities that I was talking about years ago when we started all of this process of how we need to have sort of a 1040 EZ format for comprehensive plan updates. You look at the forecast and they're not supposed to add any housing or any people or any jobs during the next decade or even the decade after that. So going through, many thousands of dollars worth of work and many hundreds of hours of meetings and whatnot, when there's nothing, they changed the color on the map from multi-family to calling it just general residential. But I mean, it's a awfully complicated process for places that aren't changing. It's a necessary process for places that are experiencing a lot of growth, because you can't handle high volumes of growth without having a good, solid, comprehensive plan. But when there's really nothing happening, that's staying the status quo, it's a lot of money to spend on an update of a plan. So we didn't get it done this time, but for the next 10 years, we really do need to have an express process for communities that aren't changing.
I think that's well taken. I think it's notable in that same vein that this is a community with whom we've had a partnership through the planning grant process, and I'm grateful that we can be involved in supporting good planning, region wide in that sense. This seems like a really good fit for that particular kind of partnership. Point is certainly well taken.
Mr. Chair, may I
Yes,
add?
Lisa.
Mr. Chair, council members, in addition, there are some new things that are new for landfall. The planning for Gold Line BRT, while it's not in their community, a good portion of their community falls within a half-mile walking distance to a station area, so it is a consideration for them while they're not growing today. In addition, managing stormwater within their community is also very important, especially being on the shores of Tanner Lake. And increasing standards, sharing that shoreline with I-94 makes it even more difficult. But those are some of the considerations that we know that smaller communities even are subject to. And one of the main reasons that we spent a lot of time on all of the resources and materials that we've provided in the handbook to really try to make that process as easy as possible. So some of you may recall approving Landfall's 2030 plan. So they were one of our last plans last cycle, and we're really happy to see that they're one of our first plans in this cycle. We hope that, having a good consultant, having a planning grant, having the materials in the handbook, we hope have helped facilitate all of that process for them.
Mm-hmm. We would entertain a motion, members, if it's appropriate.
Mr. Chair, I move approval of landfall's comp plan.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion of the motion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries. Thank you very much. Next item is 2018-201, Mississippi Gateway Regional Park Master Plan and Master Plan Bonding Amendment. Tracy Kinney is here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair Commerce, community members. My name is Tracy Kinney. I'm a planner with Regional Parks and Natural Resources, and today we have the Mississippi Gateway Regional Park and Master Plan Boundary Amendment. Looking to the image on your right, the system plan, the Mississippi Gateway Regional Park is located in the northeast part of Hennepin County, and to your left, you'll see an image of Brooklyn Park. The park is located in the city of Brooklyn Park. There are two units. There's an east unit, which is the existing Coon Rapids Dam Regional Park, owned by Three Rivers Park District, and a west unit, owned by Brooklyn Park, the Brooklyn Park Environmental Nature Area. These two units are comprised of what we are seeing as the Mississippi Gateway Regional Park. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about that, but this park connects to the eastern portion of the Coon Rapids Dam Regional Park, which is owned by Anoka County. So you see a zoomed in portion of the park. There is the east unit and the west unit, and these units are connected by two regional trails. The north-south regional trail is the Mississippi West Regional Trail, and the east-west regional trail is a squiggle on the north part of the property, and that's the Rush Creek Regional Trail. Let's see here. The Met Council approved the master plan in 1979 of the Coon Rapids Dam Regional Park. There are northern states power utility easements that are run through both sides of the property and are restrictive for park development. The master plan proposes to add a couple of properties, and you see that as part of the east unit. There's a blue parcel that's owned by Hennepin County. It's tax forfeited land, and there's a red portion to the south, and that is Brooklyn Park, a permanent easement over private land for recreation. So Three Rivers Park District and the city of Brooklyn Park intend to maintain separate ownership and then share the name of Mississippi Gateway Regional Park, and then also and they're doing that in order to create a seamless experience for users. Three Rivers Park District and the City of Brooklyn Park intend to enter into a long-term lease so that Three Rivers Park District can take the lead on operations, so that they can add a facilities maintenance building that is on Brooklyn Park land, and you'll see that as a dot. And then they would also like to realign the Rush Creek Trail and add a crossing in between the two units. And I just want to note the costs associated with the Brooklyn Park land are not eligible for council funding. The City of Brooklyn Park is not an implementing agency, and so funding is not eligible for them. So this is the development concept map. The vision here looks to transition users from the built environment all the way to the nature environment, and they have three different areas: a developed area, a transition area, and a more natural area. And here's a snapshot of the costs. You'll see that it's separated by agency, and there's development costs and operations and maintenance costs. And the total estimated costs are just under 28 million. And once again, only funds for Three Rivers Park District are eligible for Met Council funding. So staff finds that the proposed master plan is consistent with the requirements of the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan. It's also consistent with Planning Strategy 1, planning and other council policies. And the actions before you today, and there are a few, are to approve the Mississippi Gateway Regional Master Plan, to approve the Master Plan Boundary Amendment, which includes those two additional properties, and then prior to implementing the master plan, require the Rivers District to create a joint powers agreement with the City of Brooklyn Park to establish regional park use or through a long-term lease that identifies the land for the facilities maintenance building, and also the upgrades to the Rush Creek Trail, and then also then transfer that land to the Rivers Park District. And then additionally, to work with Hennepin County and the City of Brooklyn Park to transfer that ownership of the additional acreage to Three Rivers, and then to advise Three Rivers Park District that costs associated with lands and facilities with the Brooklyn Park Environmental Nature Center are not eligible for funds, for Met Council funds, and that a council-approved master plan amendment is required to add in holdings eligible for acquisition funding. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions, any members?
Move approval?
Okay.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion of the motion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have kind of a three in a row opportunity here. 3 Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund grant requests. The first.
We're 4.
4. Yeah, sorry. The first is 2018-202 for the Good Inn property at Three Rivers Park District.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good afternoon.
I will try to do all 4 of these. The first one is for the West Mississippi Regional Trail, which is in northern Hennepin County. It'll run through Dayton, Champlin, Brooklyn Park, and Brooklyn Center. The property is located on Dayton River Road, and we just recently bought another parcel for the same trail a couple of months ago. This property is located right along the river. It's adjacent to a park owned by the City of Dayton. It's also adjacent to this island here is owned by the DNR. It's primarily open, and you can see from these contour lines that some of the property is down in the flood area. It will add 7.3 acres and 830 feet of river shoreline. This floodplain overlay shows you a little bit more about how low some of the property is. And here are some of the other images. I'm going to go back to this one for just a moment. The reason that we're buying such a large property for a trail acquisition is because trail is going to run right along the road here, but there are some steep embankments, and by acquiring a larger piece of property, they have the ability to align the trail more effectively. And also, the property owner isn't interested in splitting the property. This property does have a home on it. It's a barn that has been converted into living quarters, but it has seen unfortunate days. Better, we have the vistas toward the river. We've got a creek and then the riverbank along the edge here. The barn has holes in the roof, it's got holes in the walls, and it has some significant water damage, so the city has issued a statement of uninhabitability. Because of that statement, we can use Environment and Natural Resource Trust Fund money, which prohibits using any of their money for a property that has a habitable residence. So we would have slightly over 195,000 from ENRTF, another 130 from council bonds, and 108,613 from a local match. Three Rivers has asked for a future reimbursement consideration for their local match. The request is consistent with the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, the West Mississippi Regional Trail Master Plan, which was just approved in April, and all requirements of ENRTF. It is a requirement that ENRTF properties have high-value natural resources, and this certainly meets that. Does not have a habitable residence. It is within a master plan. It's not already in the public domain, and we have talked to the LCCMR, the Legislative Citizen Commission on Minnesota Resources. They have approved a work plan amendment to include this property. Therefore, the proposed actions are to approve a grant of up to $325,839.68 to Three Rivers Park District to acquire the 7.3 acre Gooden property located at 17180 Dayton River Road in the city of Dayton for West Mississippi Regional Trail. Authorize the Community Development Director to execute the grant agreement and restrictive covenant. Consider reimbursing Three Rivers Park District for up to their share of the local match, and inform the agency that the council does not under any circumstances represent or guarantee that future reimbursement will be granted and expenditure of local funds never entitles a park agency to reimbursement. And with that, I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. Questions?
Move
Or a motion?
approval?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Discussion of the motion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, council members. And not sure why that box is on there. Thank you. And there we go. Thank you. This acquisition is for the Baker-Carver Regional Trail, which is out in Minnetrista. The trail will run through Medina all the way to Laketown Township, and you recently saw a master plan approval for this trail. This is in segment F near Halstead Bay. As you can see, this property has a sharp angle at the top, and excuse me, the property is undeveloped. Half of it is wetland, and half of it is currently under agricultural lease. Three Rivers is delaying the closing on the property until after the crops have been harvested and the lease has terminated, so the title will be clear. One thing you'll notice is the trail is going to run this direction, so I believe that is southeast to northwest. When we look this direction, so just diagonally, there is a gas pipeline that runs through. It will cross the trail in only one spot, and it will not impact the use as a regional trail. And there's the actual illustration of it. As you can see, we have some agricultural land still under crops. This one also qualifies for ENRTF funds and has been approved by LCCMR. So we have $284,613 from ENRTF, just under $190,000 from council bonds, a little over $158,000 for the local match, and Three Rivers has requested future reimbursement consideration of its match. As with the previous item, it meets the requirements of the policy plan, the appropriate master plan, and all requirements of ENRTF. Therefore, the proposed actions are to approve a grant of up to $474,355.50 Three Rivers Park District to acquire the Hodgson parcel at 7300 Halsted Drive in Minnetrista for the Baker Carver Regional Trail. Authorize the Community Development Director to execute the grant agreement and restrictive covenant on behalf of the Council. Consider reimbursing Three Rivers Park District for up to its local share, and inform Three Rivers Park District that the Council does not under any circumstances represent or guarantee that future reimbursement will be granted, and expenditure of local funds never entitles a park agency to reimbursement. With that, I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much for the report. Council members?
I move approval.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion to the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
This next acquisition is for Great Cloud Island Regional Park, which is a future park. It is not nearly totally acquired yet. As you can see here where the red circle is, this property is right here. There's a small land bridge that runs over here. This is Moores Lake, and these are the backwaters of the Mississippi River. This is an oddly shaped property, and the shape is important here for you to understand what we're doing. We are proposing to assist with the purchase of the two parcels in the southwest. This vaguely H-shaped parcel is mostly underwater, except for the land bridge. This portion and this portion of the island are sometimes above water. When the appraisal was done, the appraiser accorded no value to this easternmost segment. And the easternmost segment is outside of the master plan boundary for 99% of its area. So we are not proposing to purchase any part of this eastern parcel with Met Council or state funds. The two parcels we are proposing to help purchase are 4¼ acres, 600 feet of shoreline, and there are structures on this one. This is the land bridge that runs right along here. This is the view from Moores Lake and the house that's on the property. The county, this is Washington County, by the way, the county will take bids on to determine whether they're going to tear the house down or whether they're going to move it, whether they can repurpose any of the materials. This one is funded through Park and Trails Legacy funding because it has that habitable residence. So we're proposing $157,000 from Park and Trails Legacy Fund, $103,000 from, $157,000 from fiscal year 2018 funds, $103,000 from fiscal year 19 funds, and $174,000 from council match. Local match is $145,000. The county is not requesting future reimbursement consideration. As with the others, this request is consistent with the policy plan, the master plan, and all of the requirements of Park and Trails Legacy. Therefore, we are recommending that the Metropolitan Council approve a grant of up to $435,000. I'll try that a third time. $435,083.63 to Washington County to acquire the two Cartaric parcels comprising 4.24 acres at 10870 Great Cloud Island Drive in Great Cloud Island Township or Great Cloud Island Regional Park, and authorize Ms. Barajas to execute the grant agreement and restrictive covenant on behalf of the council.
Thank you very much. Council members, what is your pleasure?
Move approval?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion to the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, council members. This last one is also for Washington County. This is in Big Marine Park Reserve, located in the eastern side of Washington County. and this is in New Scandia Township. And I see Ms. Barajas shaking her head. The reason that it says it's in New Scandia Township is because there is a restrictive covenant on the property that is still cites New Scandia Township. So they have to clear that. I realize it's actually in Scandia. This property has 3 parcels. All 3 are included. Over here is Big Marine Lake. This is a small pond called Pitzel Pond. This is a view of the pond, another from the road that goes by, and this is the house. It's quite a nice house. The county is also taking bids on this one to see if they can move it or use part of it. For example, there is a very nice gazebo that is next to the pond that they might be able to repurpose, and a very nice garage and shop area that they might be able to use. This one is funded from 3 different sources plus council funds. We are using legacy funds from the 2019 appropriation to fund the parcel that holds the house. With the permission of the Legislative Citizen Commission on Minnesota Resources, we are using ENRTF funds to fund the other 2 parcels that do not have residential housing on it. We will close out our 2014 appropriation and begin using our 2015 appropriation. Local match will be $150,000, and they are not requesting future reimbursement consideration. It meets all of the requirements, including of ENRTF and of Legacy, along with the policy plan and the master plan. Therefore, we recommend that the Metropolitan Council approve a grant of up to $451,924 for Washington County to acquire 3 parcels comprising the 8.33-acre Boffenkamp property at 18135 Margot Avenue in the city of Scandia for Big Marine Park Reserve, and authorize the Community Development Director to execute the grant agreement and restricted covenant on behalf of the council.
Thank you very much. The report and recommendation.
Move approval.
It's been moved.
Second.
Seconded. Any discussion of the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion also carries.
Thank you, members.
Thank you. Sort of covered all 4 corners, members and us. 4 items. The next item is same week item, 2018-218, 2018 Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund bonding. Mary Robeson is here. Welcome back.
Good
And this
afternoon,
work-
Chair Commerce, council members.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. This is a follow-up to the information item that we discussed on August 6th related to the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund bonds that have been appropriated to the council. Just as brief background, in 2018, in the bonding bill, the legislature created a new bonding authority using trust fund dollars or ENRTF funds. MMB will be doing the first sale of these bonds in October or November, as discussed, and the Met Council received a $10 million appropriation for capital projects within the regional park system from this new source of funding. This is the appropriation itself. It is for improvements and betterments of a capital nature and acquisition by the council and local government units. Essentially, this is for infrastructure improvements in the regional park system across agencies, as well as reimbursement for prior acquisitions. So the question at hand is essentially whether or not the council will match this appropriation. The council's policy is to match every $3 of state general obligation bonds with $2 of regional park bonds, but we do not have an explicit policy in place, the council does not, regarding the matching of these funds as it is a new funding source. The staff's recommendation is that the council match this $10 million appropriation in the 18 bonding bill with regional park bonds of $6.66 million, so the same 2 to 3 match. Please note that this staff recommendation is limited to this particular appropriation and is not in regards to establishing an ongoing policy of matching related to this funding source. If approved, the match would be reflected in the third quarter budget amendment coming up, and we would come back to you at a later time with a discussion on a broader bonding policy related to parks bonding future. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Questions, Councilmember Elkins?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what is the distribution method for this particular pool of funds?
Mr. Chair, council member, this bonding source is covered by a formula that is laid out in the Parks Policy Plan. The formula, I believe, is based on population and visits.
Okay, so this is not these aren't earmarked dollars at all. Okay.
Correct.
Councilmember Barber?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question and a comment. So the first is the question. We just had all of these park acquisition motions go through, and there was a conversation about using ENRTF where you couldn't use it for places that had a habitable dwelling on it. So does that apply to this?
Mr. Chair, council members, that is an excellent question. It's hard to give an exact definitive answer. What I will say is that we are in the process of getting work plans approved from LCCMR for this funding, and that would be part of anything that might be approved from LCCMR.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, council member, that language is inside statute section chapter 116P. As far as we know, we're not doing any acquisition in any of the projects that have been proposed here. So it may technically apply, but it isn't relevant.
Okay.
There you go.
Thank you. And then just my comment is, in general, I'm in favor of doing this for this year. I do not think there should be a long-term policy change because my concern is that the legislature will default to use this method in the future. So I think it makes sense for now, but I personally would like to not see the policy change for the long term. So.
Thank you. Councilmember Wolf?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree on this is a one-time deal, and I don't know that it's necessary for staff to waste time on changing potential changes to the policy unless there's something else that needs to change, because I would not want to make this part of a long-term policy for the same reason as Councilmember Barber. And the projects that this money would be used for actually came through the council last fall, so you guys are reviewing to make sure that all of those are still eligible with this different money. But yeah, the list was put together last year.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I would entertain a motion, members.
Move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion of the motion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Members, our last item is 2018-219, also same week item, approval to request moving to work program designation.
Good
Very smooth
afternoon,
this year. Good afternoon.
Mr. Chair and council members. This will be sort of a brief item, refreshing on an item I spoke to you about in May. I was to you back in May to talk about the moving to work program. Since then have had some additional internal legal discussions, and so I'm back today to ask for formal approval on submitting a request to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. So just as a refresher, the Moving to Work program is a special federal designation, and it really just allows flexibility in how rent assistance programs are designed. We can obtain exemptions from federal program rules, federal regulations. It really just eases administration of the program. There are 39 MTW agencies in the nation, and this map here shows where they are, mostly on the east and west coasts. But you will also notice there's one dot in Minnesota, which happens to be Minneapolis, although the dot is quite high.
Minneapolis moved way north.
Yeah, they did. So moving to work, the Moving to Work program really allows housing authorities to do minor things, minor administrative changes, but really all the way to complete new business models and program design. So easing administration, simplifying rent calculation processes, excluding income sources, developing new partnerships, etc. So really, this is just a taste of what can be done. The sky is the limit if we were to have this federal designation. And the reason we'd want this designation, the council would want it, is because it provides us with great administrative flexibility. We can shift funds around to serve more families, and we can ease administration to ease the workload on our staff, are the primary reasons for this. And we can design local initiatives to meet our local market. So the potential for moving to work, there's language in the 2016 Consolidated Appropriations Act that allows the HUD secretary to expand existing MTW designations to adjacent agencies. So in this case, expanding Minneapolis's MTW designation to the council and potentially other agencies here in our region. So the idea is that we would submit a formal request to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to have this moving to work designation for the MPHA and the council. Any regional designation, HUD requires that it achieves greater cost effectiveness, so it saves money, that it increases housing choice, and that it promotes self-sufficiency and increased earned income for families. So the consideration for you today, or some considerations, is submitting this request doesn't tie us to anything. So we're not committed to anything. At this point, we're just simply asking for approval. The goal is for collaboration between our agencies to arrange a whole host of things, but really the goal is to maintain independent operating structures and governing structures. So without that, it would essentially be a deal breaker for us, but that's what we're asking for. And again, our goal here is to expand housing choice and mobility options, collaborating better with Minneapolis to provide better mobility and services to the families that we both serve, to create efficiencies in service delivery, and really shifting the focus from administrative process to focus on the families that we serve and their success. There would be a public process if there were to go through and agreements between the agencies. Our goals here would be to submit the formal request to HUD by the end of this month. And then in the meantime, we would be connecting with congressional representatives to gain congressional support in Washington for this concept. And if approved by HUD, we would then come back to you all for formal approval of this concept. We would be putting together what's called a moving to work agreement. It would be in place of the public housing agency plan that we had a public hearing for tonight. We would have a moving to work plan instead, and that would outline all the program design, all the policies and initiatives that we're looking to implement. And during that, we would engage with the public fully. We would engage with communities. We would engage with you all. We would engage with voucher holders to thoroughly vet the programs that we would administer. Once that were to happen, we would enter into a formal agreement with MPHA, and that would outline the details of the partnership. Of course, we will work with our legal counsel to help us with that. So what I'm asking for today is authorization to submit a request to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to have Minneapolis Public Housing Authority's MTW designation extended. And with that, I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Terry. Councilmember Dorfman.
So I'm just curious, what's HUD looking at in terms of considering this request? They've already done it for Minneapolis Public Housing Authority. So what sort of things are they looking at in terms of our ability to do this and support this project?
So the regional designation has not been done anywhere in the country yet. The Appropriations Act allows for it, but the goals really are in Minneapolis to show what efficiencies we create by this. Some of the partnerships we have outlined in our letter is that we will partner on mobility services, for example. Minneapolis has a mobility program, we have a mobility program. Combining our efforts, we can provide better and more efficient services to families. The administration, I mean, certainly we have to play into what the current administration is looking for, and actually the initial Moving to Work Act that goes back to the 90s is really about helping families that are able become self-sufficient. And so it's working with, maybe it's partnering with job agencies, maybe it's incentivizing families that work by reducing rent portions. Really the sky's the limit, but HUD is looking for those three things: increasing housing choice, creating efficiencies to reduce administrative costs, and then oh my goodness, I've looked at this so much. And then shift the focus from administrative process to family success. So it's achieving greater costs, increasing housing choice, and help residents move towards self-sufficiency. So you would all be, and we have some ideas on things that we'd like to do, but you would all be involved in that process as the policymakers to help us design a program that really works for the council and the residents.
Councilmember Dorfman.
So what kind of scrutiny will, so I'm just trying to figure out what our chances are.
You know,
So, given the current, the current environment, obviously we'll make a strong case for how we can do all these things.
Right. And we think we have a pretty good chance at this. It hasn't been done in the country. I think
know,
this
that's why
administration is motivated to create change, and regionalization is a big thing for this administration. So if we can show regional collaboration, we've talked with consultants in Washington, D.C., who also think we will have a good chance at this. And the new executive director at MPHA, Minneapolis Public Housing, came from Massachusetts, who was an MTW agency, which is helpful in framing this. But we like to think we have a pretty good shot at it.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I mean, I think this makes a whole lot of sense. I think this is great. So we'll see what happens.
Great. Councilmember Mott.
Mr. Chair, Terry, do you think that we can achieve administrative efficiencies without laying off HRA staff?
Chair Commerce and Councilmember Munn, absolutely. I mean, one example is we could change a process where we're only recertifying families on a fixed income, so primarily elderly and disabled that are on Social Security. Reviewing their household income every 3 years makes a lot of sense, and that's about 50% of the people that we serve. So that alone would create administrative efficiencies. It's things like that that we can't do now under the current federal regulations that we would be able to change. It's things like that. Make that go.
Excellent. Would entertain a motion, members?
Move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion of the motion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion
Thank you very
carries.
much.
Thank you very much. That concludes our business agenda. Members, I would suggest that we bring to the full council as non-consent items 2, 3, 9, and 10. Those include our 3 same week items and also the City of Land Falls Comprehensive Plan submittal, which I think is a significant milestone. So that's acceptable to committee members. Go forward. Okay. With that, we'll be adjourned. Thank you.